Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight at our new AWS Loft location. I'm Staten Hansen, Head of Digital Platform and Operations at AWS. Tonight, we're trying out a new Loft format for announcing new features and to give you an opportunity to engage with our product teams, partners, and customers, as well as allow our global customers to join us in real time on Twitch. We have a packed agenda tonight. First up, our AI product management team will share what's new with language services at AWS. Then we'll invite WP Engine and Boarding Area to share how they use machine learning to improve the customer experience. We hope you enjoy your time, and without further delay, I'd like to welcome our AI product team to the stage. Robert Doutricourt, Senior Product Manager for Amazon Pali, and Yanni Friedman, Senior Product Manager for Amazon Translate.
Hi, everybody. Very excited to be here today. Glad to see you here. Thanks for coming. We've got a great lineup, bunch of speakers, and boosting your WordPress website with artificial intelligence and machine learning is the topic of the day. There we go. So there's the agenda for the afternoon to give you a sense of what to expect. We're going to talk about machine learning at AWS. So what are the machine learning services? What can you do with language AI in particular? We're going to do a deep dive on Amazon Pali, text-to-speech service, Amazon Translate, which is a translation service from English to Spanish, for example. And we're going to then go into a demo for a WordPress plugin that we launched a few months ago. And that's kind of the feature topic of the day. And there's a V2 up there because that's what we're announcing today is an upgrade to that plugin. And we're excited to share with you what that new feature is. And we're then going to talk about machine learning in action, okay? And we're going to have some stories about Politico.eu, which is using the WordPress plugin today, and explain to you what that looks like. We've got our friends from Boarding Area who are here today to talk about how they're using the plugin as well. And then we're all available for Q&A to answer any questions that you might have, and we look forward to spending some time with you one-on-one to do a little networking and have fun during happy hour. So stick around. Really interested in hearing your feedback, your questions. So my name is Robin Doutricourt. I'm the Senior Product Manager for Amazon Pali. And just to step back a little bit before we dive into Pali, just want to share with you a little bit about machine learning at Amazon. We've been doing machine learning for over 20 years now. So when you think about searching for products on Amazon.com, suggested products when you search for something, other products that customers have bought, like the one that you're searching for, right? These kind of functionalities that you're very familiar with. That's part of machine learning and deep learning. We've been doing that for many years. When you go to our fulfillment center and you check out how all the products are moving throughout that large space and how we're economizing the process of getting all those items that people have ordered into those packages to be sent out quickly to customers, that's also machine learning. You may be familiar with Amazon Go, which is a retail store that opened recently where you can walk in, there's no cashier, you pick up your items, you walk out, you get billed through your mobile app. That experience, that's machine learning. So we've got lots of experience with machine learning, lots of examples. And we've got a stack now through AWS that offers those services to you as customers to use at different levels in the stack. So if you're interested, for example, in rolling up your sleeves and getting into deep learning AMIs, you've got the frameworks and interfaces like Apache MXNet, PyTorch, TensorFlow. We support a bunch of these. The next level up, at the platform level, we have a fully managed platform service called SageMaker, right? And here you can build, you can train, you can deploy your models. With a couple clicks, you can get this into AWS Deep Lens. This is a camera where you can embed those models and you can connect it with other services like Amazon Recognition to identify objects and take actions on that based on those models. It also works in connection with Amazon Pali, a text-to-speech service. So at the application level, and that's where we're going to spend our time today, we have a bunch of these services. Recognition is image. Recognition video allows you to do analysis on video. Amazon Pali is text-to-speech. Transcribe is speech-to-text. Translate takes one language like English to Spanish in text. Comprehend allows you to do analysis on text, to do keyword searches, language identification, semantics. And Lex is a chatbot conversational engine, which allows you to create chat experiences either by text or by speech. If you choose by speech, then Amazon Pali is the voice that speaks back to the individual that's engaging with that chatbot.
Do you have anything that does code analysis in the AI?
Great question. How about we hold that for the Q&A at the end? So lots of common use cases across these different services. Right? So you can see education applications for using these services for translating content, for language learning. Things like information bots. You've got that chat bot through Lex that also applies to the customer service and call centers. Localization, where you're allowed to translate from one language to another. A lot of different use cases that use the combination of these different services. Lots of customers who are using machine learning at Amazon. This is just a smattering of them. And what I'd like to share with a slide like this is not to focus on any particular customer, but rather to let you know about 90% of our roadmap is based on customer feedback. So when customers come back to us and they say, I've tried your service, or I'm using your service, or I'm thinking about your service, have you thought about this? This is a challenge that I have this kind of data. How do I solve this problem? Our roadmap is basically based on the feedback that we get from our customers. We're trying to solve real problems for those who are trying to use our services and get things done. That other 10% is basically innovating on customers' behalf. What are those things that maybe we're not hearing directly from customers, but we believe are opportunities to enhance that experience for those customers because we're essentially reading between the lines. So now we'll talk a little bit more about Amazon Pali. We offer 52 voices across 25 languages. That's a big part of what the service is about, is offering these voices. So as you can imagine, we have a roadmap of new languages and new voices that we're going to roll out. This is a real-time service. So with the API, if you send text, you get that speech back in real time, which means you can create dynamic experiences. You're not necessarily planning ahead what the speech output is going to be. It could be dynamically changing. Whatever that text is, you get that back in speech. And importantly, developers can store, replay that generated speech over and over again. So if you're generating, for example, the speech that corresponds to your blog post or your article, and you want lots of people to be able to listen to it, you synthesize that speech once, you store it locally, you cache it, that speech is now yours, right? And you can play it back as many times as you want. If you've got a bunch of customers who are clicking play, you just purchase that audio file that first time, and it's now yours to replay as many times as you like. These are the 25 languages that we support today. The most recent one that we added was Korean back in Q4 of 2017. And there's a roadmap that will constantly be expanding, so look out for what's coming next. One way to test out the Amazon Pali service is to go to the AWS Console. Each of these services has a console. You can log in, you can play with it, you can get your feet wet and get a sense of what's going on. Here you've got a text box. So in the text box, we have 100% recycled, et cetera. So the example here is to show some text that may not be trivial to speak out loud if you're a machine. Right? So a big part of text-to-speech is normalizing that text. If you have an ST, do you know if it's street or if it's saint? Right? What do you do with an X after 1.5? And so how do you read that out appropriately? So in this text box, you can put in your text. You can select the English language and region or any of those 25 that are available. In US English, we offer 8 voices today. So you can select Sally or Kimberly, or in this case, Matthew. And then you click on Listen to Speech, and you hear that audio. Or if you want to store that audio, you click on Download MP3. Other formats are available as well. So let's listen to what happens when you play this particular text in the console.
100% recycled, 8.5 by 11 inch 20 pounds office paper, 3,000 count.
So the point is, you throw speech at it, out of the box, this is what you get with this particular string. Right? What you want to be able to do is put text in there and have it read appropriately as often as possible. It's not perfect. We're constantly iterating on it, but it's really quite good. And this is a good example to share what happens when you throw some text that's not trivial, what comes out. Now, the output of that speech can vary also. Right? That's what you hear from a voice that's just out of the box. But we also have SSML tags. So this is a W3C recommendation, XML-based markup language for speech synthesis applications. And with this SSML, you can essentially tag the text, and you can modify the output in certain ways. So for example, you can change the speech rate. You can make the voice read faster or slower. You can change the pitch to make it higher or lower. Right? You can do different things. You can make it louder. You can apply a tag that allows it to sound better in a noisy environment. A bunch of different things you can do. So the idea is that even though you have these 52 voices, you have ways of modifying the speech using a series of these tags. Here's an example that I like to share because it's kind of fun. It gives you a sense of how you can modify the voices. Even though there are 52 voices out of the box, you'll note that with this one voice, which happens to be Brian, you can make that voice sound like a different person by modifying, in this case, the voice tract. And so the vocal tract is a part of your body. It's from your vocal folds to your lips. And what we're doing is we're simulating a lengthening or shortening of that vocal tract. So as you can imagine, if my vocal tract is longer, it's as if I'm a taller person, right? Because it's going to be proportional to my height. If you shorten it, it's as if I'm a shorter person, right? So the little demo here kind of gives you a sense of what that's like when this person gets bigger or smaller. But rather than thinking of it as a feature to make a voice, sound bigger or smaller, think of it more as you can use this one voice. You can make that voice sound like a different person. So if you wanted to create an experience with multiple voices, you can do that with any one of these voices offered by Amazon Pali. So let's listen.
This is Brian without any voice modifications. Imagine now that I got bigger. Suppose that I got even bigger still. Now let's go back and hear the effect when I go in the opposite direction.
Can you tell that I'm getting smaller? Now I'm even smaller than before.
So I think that's a pretty good example. You can see how the percentage is increasing, 15, 25, and then going in the other direction. And you can modify this feature independently from other features like pitch, speech rate, and so on. And so you can create these different experiences. And if you push this to the edges, it might sound a little more like a character voice. But for some customers, that may be what they're looking for, right? Maybe you're creating a gaming type of experience. Maybe you want a voice to sound a little less human. So if you really stretch those percentages, you'll find that you're starting to distort that voice a little bit. But the idea is to give you the flexibility to modify that speech output. Now, I'm sharing a few fun examples here. Sometimes we get questions like, well, yeah, but can you make the voice sound like this or sound like that or give it this accent or that accent? So here's an example of an auctioneer, right? Somebody who's auctioning off some items. And so we're using some features like loudness and speech rate. So imagine somebody who's up here who's auctioning off some items. This is a way that you can kind of pull to the extremes some of these features to modify the output speech rate here.
I'm at 500 and I want 550 bid on 550. I'm at 500. Would you go 550 for the gentleman in the corner? A big black bug at a big black bear, a big black bug at a big black bear. Do we get 600? A big black bug at a big black bear. We got 600 for the whole herd, sold for 600.
Okay. So that's a fun example because that's not something that I could do. Chances are most of you are not trained to do this. It would take a lot of practice to get this good, right? But with text-to-speech, whatever you throw at it, you'll get some output. As long as that syntax is appropriate when it comes to those SML tags, you can create an experience that's very unique. So let's talk a little bit about the use case of content creation and publishing. So you may have some news content, right? You may have an article that you want to voice. Maybe you have a blog post that you want to voice, right? What are customers doing with this kind of use case? You might also have an animation of training materials, right? You're creating a presentation. You'd like to, instead of having to record yourself or have a voice actor record, you'd like to be able to automate that process, tune it anytime you like, do it at scale. A feature that is important to bring out here, and this is an SSML feature as well, is called speech marks. Speech marks is metadata that accompanies the audio stream, which gives you timing information about when words are being pronounced. You can get that from the sentence level, the SSML tag level, the word level, and also the sound level. So every sound in a word, you get timing information about when that sound begins and when that sound ends. And if you combine that metadata with an avatar, right, and the motions of the lips that correspond to the sounds that are being spoken, you can create a lip-syncing experience. You can also do a text highlighting experience, where as you're seeing the text, such as what's on the screen here, as those words are being read, that text can get highlighted, the sentence can be highlighted, the word can be read, and so you can get this experience of audio-visual that is coordinated in time based on this particular feature. So some of our customers like to use that, especially in the context of reading, for kids, for example, but for anybody who might want to be able to read along the text that's being read. Wooshka is an example of one of our customers. It's a podcast platform based in Australia. And with their customers, are able to generate podcasts from text based on Amazon Pali voices. And so, for example, they do live sports results through connected smart speakers. And they also have a customer in the Australian, so they do newspaper stories, recipes, sports scores. So this is an example of a customer that's using our service to generate speech for this text-based content. So it's customers like this one that inspired us to do something a few months ago, which was to launch our WordPress plugin for Amazon Pali. Okay, so this is available today, and it's been out there for a few months now. We've gotten some great feedback, and we're very excited about it. It's been a collaboration with WP Engine, where we work together to put together this plugin, release it. There's also a podcast feature, so you can generate your text on your website, but you can also create a podcast. And we'll get into that in more detail. I'm kind of giving you a sense of what we launched recently. One of our customers is Politico. And so this gives you a sense of what that looks like. So you see the article here on the London Playbook, and you see between those two red bars, you've got a play button. So if you want to hear that article, you can either read it or you can play that play button, you can hear it. And they also have a podcast that corresponds to that same content, so you've got a new channel for that same content. So what we're here to announce today is an update to this same plugin. And what we've done is we've added a new service, which is AWS Translate. And what you can now do is translate the text that's in that content through the same plugin. So if your text is in English, for example, and you're voicing it with one of the voices like Joanna or Matthew, you can now also take that English text, translate it to another language like Spanish, and then have a Spanish voice that content as well. So if your content is currently in one language, but you want it available in multiple languages in text format, and especially in voice format, that's what this plugin is doing. So this is the beginning of that journey for us to offer to the publishing community the opportunity to use these two combinations of services in tandem so that you can voice both. And so Pali does the voices for all of the languages that are available, but it's a separate service called Amazon Translate, which is the great segue to my colleague, Yoni Friedman, who is going to talk to you about that service.
Thanks very much. So hello, everyone. As Robin said, I'm Yoni, and I'm the product manager for Amazon Translate, our fully managed, continuously trained neural machine translation service that we had just made generally available on April 4th here in San Francisco. I want to share a little bit more details about the service before we dive in right into the demo. Talk to you about what makes hundreds of AWS customers already believe that this is a very important tool in their toolkit, and hopefully why the time spent by you today here is going to be a really good investment of your time. So first, a little bit of consumer context here. There's an overwhelming amount of evidence that the vast majority of customers will not buy if you don't offer service in their own language. And this is true if you're offering digital content or if you're selling physical goods. Whatever you're doing, customers want to see the content in their own language. And this is true along the whole user experience. So customers want to start their purchase or whatever activity they're doing in their own native language or their language of choice. But they also want to chat to customer service in their own language. They also want to read their email in their own language. They want to post reviews of products in their own language, and so on. And this is critical because, for example, in the state of California, you have about 40% of households that speak a language that is not English at home. Now, this is not to say that they're not a lot of them are not comfortable using English as the language that they use on the web, but there's certainly a segment that isn't, that really prefers Spanish or some other language, Chinese, for example, for their online experiences. Now, there's several things you can do about this. How do you make your content available in other languages? One option is professional localization, which basically means that you hire a localization firm that assigns QA people, project managers, professional translators, often folks with master's degrees in linguistics and specific domain expertise, and they really do an awesome, awesome job. But what that also means is that professional localization is a super manually intensive process. So there's multiple layers of people who need to touch your content, and that makes it very slow in most cases. So the minimal turnaround time is several days. Anyone who's experienced this in the past must know what that feels like. And the average cost is about 15 cents per word. So if you take your average news article of about 1,000 words, that'll cost you $150 to translate into one language. The result here is that that specific approach is only a viable solution for your most absolute precious and core assets in your organization. So anything like your website UI, your application UI, your regulatory filings, your product documentation, anything that you must absolutely localize in other languages, you're willing to pay that amount of money and you're willing to wait. But what about the rest of all this content? And so the opportunity for the other solution, which is using a machine learning driven approach becomes clear when you realize that over half of consumers are actually happy consuming content in their own language, even if the language quality isn't perfect. So even if it's not perfectly human-like translation. And that's true in the B2B space as well. So over half of companies say that they're more inclined to buy software that has been localized to multiple languages, even if this language quality is not perfect. Now, we've been using machine translation, this machine learning driven approach to localization, at Amazon for several years now. It's basically been the engine of our expansion internationally. So think about the billions of items that are offered on Amazon. There's no way that we could have used humans to translate these items to all the languages that we support. So we've been using machine translations for that. We power hundreds of billions of words every year across our multiple product lines. We translate things like product listings and descriptions and search queries, website strings and functional content, communication with customers as well as with vendors and sellers, product documentation and support content, and really more and more as you think about everything that Amazon has internationally, Amazon Video, Alexa, and all these various applications that we try to make available for more and more audiences around the world. Machine translation is sort of the backbone powering that expansion. Now, at first, we were using the traditional approach to machine translation, also known as statistical machine translation. This has been sort of the prevalent approach to solving this problem for several years. And many of you might have seen translations like this. I don't know if this was a machine translation per se, but we've all seen very, very embarrassing computer translations. But then we moved on from that approach and starting using deep neural networks, which is sort of at the base of cutting-edge machine learning today. And over the past year, we've productized our own proprietary neural machine translation engines, and now we're making them available to AWS customers to leverage as a service and a capability in their own applications. Really briefly, let me touch on what does this mean? What does this move from statistical approaches to neural networks mean? So basically, the statistical approach is, to put it really simply, it's a fancy lookup algorithm. It takes parallel corpora, so a bunch of text in one language, a bunch of text in the other language, which is parallel, basically a direct translation, one or the other, and learns to perform a lookup between these two texts. So basically, when it starts translating, it says, hey, I have this word, or let's say 2 to 3 words. What is the combination of words in the target language that has the highest probability to be the translation of the words that I'm working on right now? Now, this has made a lot of content available for us that we couldn't have made available in other languages otherwise. But the problem and the challenge and the sort of limitation for us to take it and use it across the board for every use case that we want to use machine translation for has been the fact that these engines don't have a notion of understanding the meaning. There's no notion of creating a semantic representation of text. That was in the statistical approach. With the neural networks, this is a totally different approach. What we're doing with the neural networks is basically imitating the way that the human brain learns and then processes information after it's learned what to do with the specific information. And this means that they have been trained to create a semantic representation of the source content that they're working on to translate. That means that they understand the context of the sentence, that they translate the full sentence and not just 2 to 3 words at a time. They understand the subject of the sentence. So when they're translating a specific word, they understand that, hey, this is actually in the context of soccer that I'm translating this in the spirit of the upcoming Mondial. Or this is actually in the context of healthcare that I'm translating this word, so I'll actually translate this a little differently than I would have otherwise. They recognize named entities, and we really see this in the quality of the output of the engines. So let's look at a quick example. This is one of my favorite products of all times on Amazon.com for several reasons. I'm sure you'll see why. So this one has 87 tools, and it offers 141 functions. This is on Amazon.de. And this is what a customer wrote about it, about a specific part of it, which is a toothpick. I just find it amazing that there's a toothpick in that thing, although not surprising. And here's what a widely known open engine that anyone can go and paste stuff into would have done with it. Really a very good pocket knife. Had yesterday after breakfast something poppy hang between the teeth. Because I once again found no toothpicks, I ordered mine without further ado, this pocket knife. The integrated toothpick NER3 is very stable and very quickly I could clean my teeth. Super. To the rest, I can tell nothing, unfortunately, because I him not be emergency. So, you kind of get the meaning, you kind of get the point they're trying to make, but, we wouldn't put this on our website, and, there's really a lot of work here. So you see this is very limiting in terms of the applications you have for this. Now here's what, we haven't rolled out product reviews in Germany using Amazon Translate yet, but here's what the engine would have done. Really a very good pocket knife. Had a little poppy between the teeth yesterday after breakfast. Since I didn't find a toothpick again, I ordered this pocket knife shortly. The integrated toothpick number 3 is very stable, and I could clean my teeth very quickly. Great. I can't say anything about the rest because I don't need it. So, regardless of the brilliance of the review itself, there's clearly some more work for us to do, right? I'm not saying that this has come to a perfectly human level of translation. The notion of poppy, for example, over there, the point there was a seed. It's not an actual poppy there necessarily. But the meta point that I want to make is that this is way closer to what a human would have done with this text. And this is now enabling us to apply the solution for a lot more use cases than we could have done ever in the past. Continuing that thought about, this is not being perfect yet, and really understanding how to be successful with it, is the notion of problem-solution fit. So when we talk to customers, hey, how am I going to be successful with your services the most? We always talk about finding the right problem to solve with this solution. So state-of-the-art machine translation is perfect for situations where you have a really large volume of content that is relevant for a limited amount of time. So think about your user-authored content like reviews and forums and forum posts, for example. Think about any kind of interpersonal communication. So your customer service chat, your real-time gaming chat scenario. Some of you might have noticed we were playing a demo that we built on Twitch on how we translate Twitch chat in real time. Situations where you need to take a huge amount of content and extract some insight out of that, where that content might be in many languages, are also a super useful application we're being told by customers. So, for example, if you want to derive the sentiment out of a huge stream of tweets, for example, or want to classify documents that you get as part of some litigation case or anything like that, content discovery, super relevant use case, and subtitling or live captioning are all use cases where we see customers be very successful with this solution. Now, the key point here is that these use cases, this type of text, is the 99% of digital written text in the world today, which in most cases has not been translated yet. So with this, we're at this inception point where customers are realizing, hey, I now have a solution that will enable me to translate and make my content available to all of my customers, regardless of their nationality, regardless of the languages that they want to use. And I can do this cost effectively, and I can do this in real time. So this is really a transitional point where we're starting to see customers get to the point where all of their stuff is available to all of their customers. There's no language barriers. There's still a certain amount of content, what we talked about, UI, marketing materials, regulatory filings, where we say, hey, there's a very limited amount of text that you need to translate here. the value and the cost of making a mistake is very, very high for you. So what we recommend in that situation is to use machine translation to take a first pass at the content and then have professional linguists make sure that it's all good and edit it wherever it's needed. Quickly to touch on what you have to use today if you were to try it out. So currently we support 12 language pairs, which is from English to Arabic, Simplified Chinese, French, German, Spanish, and Portuguese, and vice versa. We're very close to releasing another 6 languages. There's going to be Japanese, Russian, Italian, Turkish, Czech, and traditional Chinese. Those are coming this summer. And we're going to, of course, keep working on additional languages that our customers ask us for. You can translate any kind of plain text at the moment. We're also working on tag handling. So if there's formatted text that you need translated, for example, with XML, HTML tags, you'll very soon be able to throw that in, and we'll extract the tags, translate the content, put the tags back in the right place. The inference is real time. So we can right now do a sentence on average in about half a second, up to 500 milliseconds. Short sentences, so for example, if we look at Alexa utterances or like chat snippets and stuff like that, we see that we often do those in 150 milliseconds even. It has the native language ID capability. So if you pass an input to it that you don't know what the source is, what the source language is, we will identify the language on behalf of the customer and then do the translation with the identified language. Super easy to integrate. One of the key tenets that we have at AWS, and we've continued along at Amazon Translate, is the fact that we want to abstract as much complexity from customers. So we want everyone to be able to leverage the service without needing any PhDs, any machine learning scientists on their staff. And so we've abstracted all this complexity. You can use this service with 3 lines of code in Python. That's all you need to know. And this is AWS security standard. So for many AWS customers, this has become sort of synonymous with AWS. And when I was talking to my marketing team about, hey, what am I going to be telling customers here? They said, no, you don't need to put the security thing there. But I said, in the translation space, this is critical. Because we've seen a lot of these PR storms over the last year where customers, small and very, very large customers, go take a certain batch of their documents, copy-paste it into a publicly available engine, and somehow their confidential content becomes searchable on some of the search engines. That has been very, very unpleasant to many of our customers, and this is something that we guarantee never happens. All right, now to the really interesting part. I'd like to invite Tomasz to show you what this plugin can do.
Hi guys, my name is Tomasz and I'm working as solution architect based in Europe, Poland. And I have got a pleasure today to do this small demo about how the Pali plugin works. So let's look into it. So first of all, why WordPress? Some of you may be familiar, some of you may be not familiar, but WordPress is #1, the content management system in the world. We say that about 25–30% of the world websites are using WordPress. So if you want to have a website, if you want to have a blog, probably you will use WordPress to quickly create it. Sometimes you need just a couple of minutes, 3–5 minutes to start blogging and publishing your content to the world. Why people are using WordPress? There are many different reasons. One of them is that it's really easy. It's cheap because you don't need to pay for anything. It's open source and it's really easy. You don't need to have technical skills to start writing content. Like Robin mentioned at the beginning, we published Amazon Pali plugin for WordPress a couple of months ago. And in a nutshell, it has got a couple of different features. So first and the most important feature for us was that it enabled our customers to convert text into audio. So how does it work is that the person needs to have a server. It can be in AWS, but it can be outside of AWS. So in AWS, this will be EC2 or Lightsail. If this is outside of AWS, it's up to you where you will be hosting it. And of course, there is WordPress on the server. So the user installed the plugin, so Amazon Pali plugin for the WordPress. And now whenever the user will click on publish post, so he's publishing new post, new content on his website, the plugin what will do, it will send the request to Amazon Pali. So the user need to have an account on AWS. There will be an API call to the service. The content, the text, the post will be sent, and the audio will be returned. And then it will be saved on S3. So now the user will be able not only to share the text, but he will be also able to share the audio for this post. The second feature, the second functionality of the plugin was the availability of creating podcasts in a really easy way. So in short, how does it work is based on the previous features which I described. So now based on the list of audio files which were generated, the plugin what it's creating is also creating the feed. The feed can be then sent to, for example, to iTunes, and then based on this, the podcast can be created, and we can reach new people, new users. The last feature which we would like to announce today, which is new because it was announced today, is the integration with Amazon Translate. So now we enable our users who are using the WordPress and our plugin to quickly and easily translate the posts from one language to another language. And now how does it work is that whenever the user will click on the translate button, he wants to translate the content into a different language, what the plugin will do is first it will call the Amazon Translate. So single API invocation, it will provide the text and will provide the language from and to the text should be converted. Then based on this, again, Amazon Pali will be called. So here's the text in new language. We want to have an audio for this, and then we'll save the audio on S3. And we will repeat this process for every language to which the user wants to convert his post. Okay, so let's see how does it looks in real life. So I will just log to AWS Console. So probably most of you are familiar with AWS Console, so I won't describe what it is. So before, I guess yesterday, I have created a Lightsail server on which I have got already WordPress installed. So this is so Poploft server, and I will just log into this WordPress. So for those of you who have never used WordPress, this is an administrator console. So here we can create new posts. We can make some kind of configuration changes on our WordPress. And one of those things is also we can install new plugins. So I will just go to Plugins tab, and I will see what kind of plugins I have already installed there. And I don't have a Pali plugin here, so I will just add new plugin. So WordPress has got its own library of plugins, so I'm able to look for our plugins. So Amazon Pali, and let's look for it. So we see that there is the plugin Amazon Pali for WordPress. So the way how to install and activate the plugin is really easy. So we just click install, and after a couple of seconds, we will click on activate. And after this, the plugin is there, and we can start using this. So the plugin is activated. So now in the settings page, I have got a new tab, Amazon Pali. And this is the place where we will modify the plugin when we'll specify how does it work. So first of all, I will need to specify AWS credentials. Like I said before, we need to have AWS account to start consuming the APIs. So in this case, I will just provide standard API credentials. If we would be hosting the WordPress on EC2, we could use standard identity access management roles. So I have prepared before my credentials, so I will just copy them and provide them here. And I will save it. So now what the plugin should do is should detect that the credentials were correct, and I'm able to modify the behavior of the plugin. So of course, I'm able to specify the region where the files will be stored, which services in which regions will respond to my request. I'm able to say where the player will be, where it will be stored, above the post, below the post, and so on. And also I'm able to specify the voice of the Pali. So different languages, 25 languages like Robin said before. So let's live with Matthew voice here. And let's say we want to store our files on S3. So let's save the changes. So after we save the changes, the plugin will also notify us that the S3 bucket where the files will be saved is this. So this is new bucket which was created by the plugin. So if I will open my S3 console, so this was the view before I created the bucket, the plugin created the bucket. If I will refresh it, I should see that there's a new bucket, and I'm interested in this bucket because here the audio files will be saved. Okay, so let's try to publish a new post. So let's go to post, let's add new post, and let's create a new post with the title. So this will be the title, and this will be the content. So we are using artificial intelligence services, so let's create the post about artificial intelligence. So 1 second. Okay, so the post is ready, so let's try to publish this. So when we click on the publish, now what plugin will do, it will detect that the plugin is installed, so it will send the text to Amazon Pali, and it will create the audio. So first of all, if I will again open my S3 bucket, and if I will refresh the page, I should see that there is a new file, the directory, so the date, and Amazon Pali 10 MP3. So the audio file for this post was created, and okay. So and if I will now open my web page, my WordPress post, I see the content, and I have got the player. So this player is provided by the plugin. So if I will click now on play.
Machine learning on AWS. At Amazon, we've been investing deeply in artificial intelligence for over 20 years. Machine learning.
So we are able to listen to the post. We don't need to read it. We can just click on play, and we can start consuming it. So we are driving to the work. We are, driving on the bike, and we can listen to the post. Okay, so let's go back to our plugin page, and let's now focus on those two other features of the plugin. So the second feature was the integration with the possibility of creating the podcast. So what plugin provides us is creating the feed. It's creating the feed, XML feed, which we can send to, for example, to iTunes. And based on this feed, iTunes will create an official podcast on iTunes. So I don't have time for this. In short, here is the link. We could click on it, and we could register this feed. But I can also show you how does it work, because we don't need to create official podcasts to test how does it work. So I will just copy the link, so the link of the feed, and I will just open iTunes. Okay. So I will just open the podcast functionality. And in short, if we would register our WordPress and official podcast source, then we would be able to find our WordPress site here in the search box. We don't have time for this, so let's try to now just to subscribe to podcast based on the link. So I will provide the link here, and I will click on OK. And now I see that I'm subscribed to my podcast. I have got only one post now, so let's click on play.
Machine learning on AWS. At Amazon, we've been investing deeply in
So I'm able to listen to the post which I have published. If I will click now, if I will try now to publish a new post, so let's go and let's create second post. This is second post by Tomasz. Let's publish this. So now all the users who are subscribed to our podcast will get notification that there's a new podcast which you can listen. I will just refresh the view here, refresh the podcast, and I see the second post is here.
Second post. This is second post by Tomasz.
I'm
Machine
also-
learning on AWS.
I'm also able to customize the image for my own purposes. Okay, so let's focus now on this third functionality which we are announcing today, in fact. So let's go again to the Pali settings page. And underneath, we have got Amazon Translate configuration section. So let's enable the translation support. Let's save the changes. Okay, so after I enable it, okay, maybe like this, okay. So after I enable this, I have got a couple of other options which I can change. First of all, I can change the source language. So currently the plugins support 5 languages, so this will be English, German, Spanish, French, and Portuguese. In this case, I will be writing in English, so I will live with this language. There are a couple of labels. For now, I won't describe them. It will be clearer later when we'll see the post. And what is the most important, I will specify to which languages I want to translate my content. So, of course, I will select all of those because I want to increase the number of users who can listen and read my post. And for each of those languages, I can also specify the voice of Pali. So if I want to translate the post to German, I can specify which German voice I want to use to create audio. So let's say I want to use Hans in this example. OK, so let's save the changes. OK, and let's go back to our post and maybe to the first post which we have created. OK. So currently, the post is only available in one language. So now underneath, we have got a new button, Translate. So I have got information that if you will translate it, the post into 4 languages. So I will just click on it. Now, depending on the number of languages and the size of the post, it will take a couple of seconds or a couple of more seconds to translate it. I see that it's being translated to French, and now to Portuguese, and now it should be ready. So translation completed. So now if I will go back to my post, to my WordPress site, something has changed. So I will just increase this a bit. So above the player, I have got a new possibility to change the language. So listen in other languages, English, Espanol, Deutsch, and so on. So those are those labels which I was able to specify in the configuration page. So in English, this will behave like it used to be.
Machine learning on AWS. At Amazon.
So nothing has changed. But now if I would click on Spanish, for example.
Aprendizaje automático en AWS. En Amazon. Hemos estado invirtiendo profundamente.
German.
Machine Learning in AWS. Bei Amazon investieren wir seit über 20 Jahren tief in.
So we're changing those languages. But what I have skipped in the settings page, let's go back there, Amazon Pali, there was one more options which we didn't change. So there was option show transcript. So if I will enable this option, if I will save the changes, now the player will look a bit different. So if I will refresh the page, so the English, it's still the same. If I will click on Spanish, for example, now below the player, I have got the text itself in this other language. So now there's this box with this language, but we are working on changing this and making this a bit more user-friendly. So Spanish, German, French, and Portuguese.
Machine Learning na AWS na Amazon. Temos investido profundamente em inteligência.
So you see that, in a couple of more minutes, we were able to create the WordPress and start publishing our posts in different languages. We were able to create the podcast functionality, and everything thanks to Amazon Pali plugin. So that's all from my side. If you will have got any questions, happy to answer them on QA session. And now I invite Steven from WP Engine, who will talk a bit how Politico is using the plugin for their own purposes. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Steven. I'm here to share a customer journey with you on behalf of one of our shared customers between WP Engine and AWS. It's a publication known as Politico, and we'll be talking about how they're reaching more of their customers, expanding omnichannel or efforts towards omnichannel to augment changing their site from a simple website into more of a digital experience with more opportunity to reach more people. Quick background on me. I am the WordPress Innovation Program Manager at WP Engine. Spend a lot of my time working with technology partners, being strategic, doing a little bit of dev. I'm one of the co-authors of the Amazon Pali plugin for WordPress with Tamaj, who's been an absolute pleasure to work with, so fun. I'm also a WordPress core contributor of about 5 years. I have a number of plugins in the ecosystem. I also enjoy hiking and trying to make music. I call it instrumental hip hop, but Robin said acoustic hip hop. We're gonna have to agree to disagree on that. I work on behalf of WP Engine. So we are the WordPress digital experience platform. What separates us from other hosting platforms is we take the open source software of WordPress and we add a lot of value adds on top of that. We focus on agility, integration with best-in-class partners, New Relic, AWS, the like. We do managed security, managed upgrades, to basically give, smile, an enterprise class experience on something that is typically very accessible, but we really elevate that and prepare it for the high concurrency, scalable security that the enterprise sector demands. We have a couple of publications. Velocitize is based mainly around the marketer. We get a lot of thought leadership. There's a lot of really great things in there, especially for marketing personas. Torque is our WordPress blog where we interview industry leaders, give development tips. So if you find yourself in the developing space, like to know more about how to get started with WordPress, there's also some really great information about the plugin there. And then our core WordPress managed product, which we have multiple tiers. We're based out of Austin, Texas, but we also have offices San Francisco, London, San Antonio, and also recently opened offices in Limerick and Brisbane. But today I'm actually here to talk about Politico. Unfortunately, they were not able to make it and they were really upset, but they still wanted us to present because they saw an opportunity here with Amazon Pali and they wanted to share this story. So Politico is one of the leading news outlets in the EU. They're based out of Brussels. They have a readership of about 15,000 people a week, and that was traditionally done through a print medium, distributed on a once-a-week thing. They were very gracious, and they were actually our launch partner for the original version of Pali. So they're not risk-adverse, and we appreciate that. And they've had a really great experience since we've been working with them in January. We'll just tell you a little bit about where they're coming from and where they are today. So, when they are based in Brussels, but offices across Europe, they have, when they opened their London office in 2016, they introduced 2 new publications, and these would be the playbooks. These are daily newsletters. They go out roughly at 7 a.m. every morning, targeting largely people working in government sectors, embassies, things like this, people that need to have, get their information in a time-sensitive fashion, because it's relative to what they'll be doing at work that day. Unfortunately, a lot of us don't have a lot of time in the mornings, so being tethered to a desktop or a mobile device or something like this was always a little bit of a challenge. They do aim to own the mornings, though. Like, this is a very important part of their business. Once again, people in government, things move very quickly. And to get away from the print thing, being able to produce a daily newsletter, that was definitely a step up for them in being able to get information out quickly, but they found ways to make improvements. So before the introduction of Amazon Pali for WordPress, this is how they were doing things. You basically had 2 options. You had a daily newsletter, it would show up in your inbox. This is not something you can do while you're making your coffee, right? Same thing with the mobile experience. Yes, you can look at that, but you can't do it while driving or on your subway. That would be dangerous. You certainly can't do it while you're doing a run. So you're basically tethered to your device. So along came Pali for WordPress plugin, and it's opening up this audio channel, and it's expanding beyond it's not just giving people another way to consume content, it's actually allowing them to digest content at a time when they would not have the opportunity to do it otherwise. So now we have the ability to listen through iTunes. Now you can do this on a desktop or you can do it through a mobile device. But the iteration here is that now I could press play on my desktop and now I can go make myself a cup of coffee or put on my necktie or whatever I need to do for the day while I'm getting ready around the house. What you'll notice here is on the mobile slide is there's now that introduction of the audio player that appears in line at the bottom half there. I do realize it's a little bit small, but the same sort of thing. You could hit play, put it back in your pocket, and move about your business. And this is where I think things start to get really interesting. So as Tomas was speaking to earlier, we found it really compelling to introduce this idea of a podcast. This opened up a couple of other things. No longer does it allow you to get away from your device, but you can actually save to your device locally. So you could be offline and still have stored MP3s of the content. Now you can actually strap this to your arm and go for your run and not worry about being dangerous or risking others. You can do it while you ride a bike. And then also, something that I think is particularly cool is it integrates with both Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So if you were a commute by car, now you can safely digest this content without actually having to hold up your device and try to scroll and move to the next article and hit the play button. So it's reaching people in a way that they typically would not have been able to access the content before. And now, the big announcement for today, translations. Keep in mind, Politico is a European news organization based around politics, right? They, through their other product, Politico Pro, that is a resold product, it's a premium. They're selling that to other news organizations, kind of like the Associated Press does. So they have, in all of major EU countries, they have subscribers in France, Poland, etc. And it's very important for them to be able to keep up with what's going on, to maintain relationships, etc. Now, content can be authored in their native language, or they can be in the editor's native language, but they can still consume it in the language that is important to them, right? So say that if I was working for the Spanish embassy, but I wanted to know what was going on in the UK, this provides a very natural way for me to adjust English content in Spanish. And as you can see, there's also still the player there, and then podcast functionality will also be coming for this as well. Yeah, they're very, very excited about it. They've gotten a lot of really, really great feedback. As always, you can see that we're iterating. And one thing I would also like to mention is, the product is open source. It's available on GitHub. You can find it on AWS Labs. So if any of this is interesting to you, or you got some ideas, open a pull request or open an issue, or just get some general feedback. We'd love to hear more about it. And that I'm sorry, I have one more slide. And one thing else that we learned, we've done a lot of case studies on this thing. What we have learned at WP Engine is we know the voice is not going anywhere. Amazon did some research and determined that people can consume and iterate content via speech and listening 4 times quicker than you can read an article. And just think about the bandwidth cost and time savings of that. We've done a lot of generational studies. We also were trying to prepare for the next generation of professionals coming online. One thing that we learned through them is that through a ComScore study, about 50% of those interactions are actually expected to be voice-based, both listening and going the other way. So, as a part of these partnerships, we just always think about, how to move forward, how to push it forward, and make a website more than a website. And we would like to thank both Amazon and Politico for letting us work with them. It's been a fantastic experience and hopefully more good things. Thank you.
Hey there, my name's Denny Butts. I'm from Boarding Area. This is Josh. He's going to talk here in a minute. Boarding Area is a travel blogging network that consists of over 100 blogs around the world. We are in 16 different languages, localized to those different ones. It allows us to have unique opportunities for those bloggers to speak in their own voice in their region. We're doing about 10 million plus a month in visits to our blogs and all across the network. We're a publishing platform by default. We started about 30 plus years ago as a newsletter. The founder of the company figured out the whole miles and points game everybody knows about, getting the first class upgrades and stuff like that. So he started off with a newsletter. We went into a magazine. At one point, he was involved in the old AOL days, the CompuServe days, into forums, created Flyer Talk. Some of you might have heard of Flyer Talk. And then we created Boarding Area to get into the blogging network. With that, and one of the greatest things about it is, and why we're excited about Amazon Pali and the Translate features, is that we find an opportunity for us to evolve once again from all of these years that we've been moving through for all of our customers. So with that, I'm going to let Josh talk, our lead developer here.
Good afternoon. My name is Josh. I'm the lead WordPress developer for Boarding Area, and we just want to talk briefly about why we're excited as publishers for Pali and Translate and this plugin coming out, specifically in WordPress. As Denny said, we are a network of over 100 plus blogs. We have a tremendous reach, and we have multiple languages. We do run on the WordPress platform, which I assume most of you are familiar with. Obviously, one of the challenges for us is the language reach, the language barrier, with us having 16 different languages. At one point, we attempted to sort of cross-pollinate one of the networks and start to translate blog posts in an attempt to reach different markets, different languages. As you can imagine, and as they touched on before, this can be a tremendous challenge, not just with time, but also cost and effectiveness. We went through this, exhausted the means of it, and really kind of deemed that it wasn't something that was viable for us to do and to really be able to translate this network. We find that with Pali and Amazon Translate and the WordPress plugin that the team has developed, that this essentially solves the problem for us as publishers, and will allow us to translate all of our languages and eventually to all the languages that we support. And this is done essentially in real time at low cost. And one of the reasons why we're really excited about this and the way that it works is, and I think that you've seen in some of the examples, is that this translation is human readable. A lot of the translations that we might know of or have experience with, they're kind of laughable to an extent. You almost have to translate the translation before you can start reading it. And as we've seen here, the translation is very accurate and it's very human readable. Like they said, it's not perfect, but it's absolutely consumable in a way that has not previously been done. So we're extremely excited about that opportunity and what it'll allow us to do in expanding our reach across languages. Another thing that this plugin and these services do is it offers us a podcast solution. A lot of our bloggers are travelers. They're frequent flyers that are constantly on the road. Our top blogger actually literally lives on the road. He does not have an apartment. He doesn't have a house. He stays in hotels day in and day out. So for him to be able to create quality media in video or audio obviously presents a challenge. Again, with the Pali, this is a service that we feel solves that problem and solves it, immediately with limited resources and availability. Another benefit that we see that Politico also touched on, and I think this is not just for travelers or frequent flyers, but for anyone consuming content in general. Being able to access blog posts and listen to them on the go, to download them, not be connected necessarily to Wi-Fi, and be able to consume the content the way that you want to and how you want to do it. I think all of these features for us, we see as a game changer for publishers, and we're very excited about the features. With that said, I think we're going to have the speakers come back up and open it to Q&A.
Thanks, everybody. Yes?
We have integrations for Pali with our translation services, with other AWS services like email services, SMS, voice, kind of that.
Specifically in this plugin?
Yeah, what I'm asking is like, do we have integrations for AWS Pali service along with email service? Like if I want to send an email, I can use Amazon simple email service, but I would also like to add translation facilities in that.
So I don't think we have anything like that today, but that would be an interesting use case for us to consider.
Yeah, so I would say very often I'm saying that AWS services are like Lego blocks. So you just combine a couple of Lego blocks and you build something which was not available in the past. Sometimes we'll do this by ourselves. Like in this example, we'll take one Lego block, Amazon Translate, Amazon Pali, WordPress, and this is something which we provide to the community. But sometimes, we don't build this solution. Sometimes it's up to the users to combine those Lego blocks and to build this new cool functionality.
Go ahead.
So on Pali, are you guys on the roadmap trying to be like a full translation replacement, kind of like what Transposh is, which is kind of in the WordPress community? Is your goal to be that kind of service where you can replace more than just the blog content, but also like if someone had a design and they needed to translate the header, the footer, and things like that? Is that Pali's on roadmap or not?
So just to be clear, Pali is going to take care of the voicing, right? And the translate feature will take care of whatever's translation. So you're asking about the plugin itself?
Yes. Yeah, the WordPress plugin specifically.
So I would say, to be perfectly honest, this is the first step in this journey, right? And so we're taking that step by integrating the translate service into this plugin. And as you can probably come up with a number of features and next steps, right? We've been thinking about this, and part of that collaboration is with you guys, learning what is your feedback. Whether you're going to do something, with this through open source, whether you're going to reach out and you're going to leave a comment on the forum, or we have these kind of conversations here. So to be perfectly honest, it's all really an open roadmap, and we'll see where it goes.
So I noticed in the second post that you made on WordPress, it was able to pronounce Tomaj's name correctly. How the heck did you do that? It's in English. It's not in Polish, it's in English, so how the heck did you do that?
So there are two answers for this, to be honest. So the first answer is I think the Pali will pronounce Tomasz in a proper way because I didn't teach it, how to read it. But let's say you have got a word, a name, something, and the Pali just won't be able to read it in a proper way because this is a foreign name or word and so on. So with the plugin, what you can use lexicons. Lexicons are a Amazon Pali functionality. So you can say that if there will be word like this, read it like this. So there's in the configuration page, you can specify those lexicons before you upload it to AWS. And then based on those lexicons, Amazon Pali will know that if in German, English, or one of the languages there is this word which it should be written in a different way, it will be written in a different way. So it's possible to customize this. Yeah.
Just to add to that a little bit, it's essentially an override on what the voice is going to read out of the box. So if every time you encounter AWS, you want it to be read as Amazon Web Services, the lexicon feature will allow you to say, replace this string with this other string. You can also use an SSML tag feature like we were talking about earlier for speech rate or volume or pitch. And you can actually spell out, for this particular word, I want it pronounced this way. So you could pronounce and add the phonetic symbols. And instead of having a S sound for Thomas, you could have a Sh sound for Tomasz. Right? And so you can modify those vowels and consonants. And that's more of a manual approach. So if you want to do it one change just one time manually, you can use that approach. If you want it to apply every time you encounter that string, then you would use the lexicons.
I had two questions. One was, have you guys figured out a metric for quality of translation in AWS Translate? I mean, you kind of highlighted it on the screen, but to be able to do an apples to apples comparison. And then the second question was just about pricing. You didn't touch on that at all.
Yeah. Is this working? Great question. So with regard to quality, first of all, there's two approaches for doing that. One is a sort of a quantitative approach. So there's a bunch of algorithms that do that for you. So you take a reference translation done by a human linguist, and you compare the output that you've produced with your engine to that translation, and that produces a score. There's multiple approaches to this. The scientific community is super excited about developing new and constantly improving algorithms. Some of them are Blue, Meteor, Tear, HLEP, or really there's a bunch of approaches to how you might do that. The second approach, which we normally do when we're about to release a new round of models, is using human evaluators. So we basically take a set of several hundreds of sentences which we create from multiple domains. It's 12 domains, last I checked, because we're trying to basically cover any kind of content that customers might use the service for. And we run a human evaluation. So we take several human linguists that this is, their profession is to translate text like these. And we have them rate, basically do a double-blind evaluation, have them rate our translation and a linguist-produced translation to the same source text. And then we basically look, what is the delta between the two to decide, hey, is this good enough as our next iteration, or do we need to do some more stuff? The quantitative approaches, I'd say, are very widely used because doing these human evaluation costs a lot. Not everyone can afford themselves to do several hundreds of sentences of evaluations every time they release a new feature. But I'd say, generally speaking, they're most useful for tracking the changes and the upgrades of the same system. It's hard to use them to compare between systems and so on, so the reach is limited there. Second question was pricing. Thank you for that. The price is $15 per 1 million characters. If you sort of think about that example that I used, the $150 to translate an article, so you're looking at about 7.5 cents to do the same thing with Amazon Translate. And you also get, actually, this is pretty awesome, you get a 2 million character free tier per month for the first 12 months to get started with the service. So if you're a single developer or a startup that's just want to try it out, or maybe you don't have that much content, 2 million words for context is about, 2 million characters is about 400,000 words that you can translate every month for free. So if that's the extent of your usage, it's going to be free for the first year.
I'll talk about pricing for Pali just to give that context as well. So it's $4 per million characters for Pali. We have a pricing page with examples. So for example, Huckleberry Finn, right? If you were to synthesize that entire book, that costs something like $2.40, right? You synthesize it once, you play it back as many times as you want. We have a free tier, which is 5 million characters per month for the first 12 months. So for folks who want to just try out the service, you got plenty of run rate to try it out before you actually have to pay a cent. So some good pricing there as well.
Hi, over here. I want to circle back. I think a different way, I have two questions. The first one maybe relates to how somebody else was asking it. So I know this tonight showcases the WordPress plugin, but behind the scenes, do you have an SDK or an API that allows a developer to interact directly with either or both services, and essentially doesn't have to be in a WordPress environment, they could bake it into their own application?
So yes, absolutely, yeah. And that's how most customers use it. Right. The WordPress plugin is really an ability to create this through the WordPress content management system without having to get into the SDK, and it's more of the installation process that Tomasz was sharing. But otherwise, both services and all of these services that we talked about will have their own SDKs that you can implement.
Yeah, and this SDK is for many different languages, Java, PHP, and so on, about 10 of those usually. Yeah. And usually in those examples, the system, you just invoke this method in this service. So usually those will be 3 lines of code, invoke, send this data, and get the response. So it's really easy to start using it.
Second question I had, I thought one of you, and correct me if I'm wrong, I thought one of you mentioned that there's an auto language detect capability.
Yeah.
So my question then is, obviously outside the scope of the WordPress plugin, but using the SDK or one of the APIs, could somebody, let's say, as a thought experiment, pass an entire bucket or a bucket in a prefix division of an S3 region and pass 1 million documents in that they don't necessarily want to incur the cost of translating all of them, but they would like to use at least the Translate service through the API to create like a language map of the documents?
Yeah, so actually Translate uses a different AWS service called Amazon Comprehend on the back end to do this language ID. Okay. And you can do exactly what you're saying with Amazon Comprehend.
So you could actually
There's a
use
separate API for language ID within Amazon Comprehend.
Without necessarily having to translate an entire
Without
document.
having to translate it or anything else.
Okay, great. Yeah. Thank you.
if you have like a block quote or bolded text or italicized text in a post, does the cadence of the voice change? Because if it does, I could see myself like really changing the way that I write blog posts as far as like bolding text and stuff like that.
Can you?
I'll tell him what he wants, and then you'll build it. Because that's how it's going to happen. So SSML tags, right? The two that are enabled today in the plugin. You can add, I'm going to get to your question, but right now there are many tags. You can add a break, which is essentially a pause. So you could go in with your text and you could add a tag that says, I'm putting in a pause of 500 milliseconds, 2 seconds, whatever it is. That's one of the SSML tags that's enabled today. Another one is a breath feature. So you can actually automate breath sounds, right? The sounds that I'm breathing, right? You can automate that throughout your blog post or your article, and that's to increase the naturalness of that reading. Now, if you wanted to add something else, like you wanted to say, whenever you encounter italics, then do something different, like make it read faster or slower, or change the timbre, right, which is that vocal tract length where we had Brian getting bigger and smaller, right? And so you might say, anytime you encounter italics, change the setting so that the voice sounds different. Or if the entire post is read in one voice, change it to a separate voice altogether, right? So there you would be able to use a different tag specifically for that italics. And so there what we would need to do is to implement within the WordPress plugin that this particular tag is enabled so that you can use it for the particular context that you would like. And SSML tags, by the way, don't incur any pricing. So when you add that tag that says, I want this particular content to be faster, slower, I want to add the breath, et cetera, those tags are ignored when it comes to pricing. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay.
We got time for 2 more questions.
My question is about where this all might be heading in the next few years. So obviously, there are going to be improvements in the algorithm. The language is going to become more natural sounding. You're going to be expanding into a wider array of languages, right? But beyond that, what other kinds of capabilities do you see coming down the pike? And also, do you see a day when it's not up to the publisher to decide that I just want to enable these 3 or 4 languages, but actually it's more of a pull instead of a push, where a user who speaks Swahili will come to your website and be able to press a button, be able to translate it into his own native language?
That's a great question. I think a lot of customers that we're talking to are thinking not just what can they do right now, but they're really thinking in terms of a voice-first movement. They're thinking, what's my roadmap for 12 months, 18 months? How do I take the content that I'm producing or that my organization's producing, how do I make that available to everybody in every modality that they might want, right? And so voice is a channel that allows them to do that. And whether it's a plugin, whether it's an Alexa third-party skill, or any other number of methods, I think the idea is to expose this as much as possible to an ever-increasing audience. How do you get to the point where it's Swahili or whatever next language it may be, and how do you make it possible so that every content that they touch, they're able to convert in a fashion that is suitable to them? I think there are also other features that you could expose to that end user, such as we have a customer, Dogo News, which produces articles for kids. And each of the articles is synthesized every day using Amazon Pali with different voices. And so you can imagine changing the content of that article, reading it to you in the voice that you prefer, or at a speech rate that you like. You know, different listeners may have different preferences. They want to listen to a different speech rate. So part of the learning process is figuring out what is it the end user actually wants? What do they consume? And so what we're also learning is what are some of the metrics around this, right? What are people actually doing? How do they engage with these opportunities? What are the next features that they want? So the kinds of questions that you guys are asking help us to innovate on your behalf to create those kinds of opportunities.
Yeah, to add to that, I think we're just launching this today. We want to see what people tell us that they want in addition to this, but this is definitely not where we stop with this plugin. You know, of course, there are many other ideas of what additional AWS services we might add to this particular plugin, or in general to various platforms that our customers use in addition to WordPress. Specifically with regard to Amazon Translate, you know, 2 of the things that we're going to keep investing into heavily are acquiring a lot more training data so that we can keep expanding the quality of translation across various domains. So today, we, for example, do really, really well on news type articles. And maybe there's some other domain that we do not as great. So we want to make sure that we supply one engine, one general purpose engine that customers don't need to customize, for example, because we know that that's a lot of pain. That's a lot of work. You need very specialized type of labor force to do that kind of stuff. You need scientists. You need your own really high quality and a lot of training data to customize your own engines. We want to keep extracting as much complexity from our customers as we can. So we'll keep investing into a lot of additional training data, a lot of cleaner, better aligned training data, and we'll keep iterating on the architecture to, again, go in that direction of producing one translator that can handle any kind of content with these same qualifications. So in real time, really low cost, and super easy to integrate.
A universal translator, Star Trek.
If you have an embedded media file or something, or like a link to SoundCloud or something, and you want to do a music podcast, does it have the ability to get that and include it in the recording, or do you have to edit the file after you generate the speech?
You're asking about media other than the speech that comes from the text?
I mean, just in general, if you have like an image, will it read the alt tags, or if you have like a SoundCloud link or YouTube link, does it attempt to extract the audio from that resource? Or?
Yeah, so currently how does it work is that whenever there will be images or something like this on the post, it will just skip them, so it won't read it won't describe them and so on. We're thinking about maybe we should do it. If yes, how should we use maybe Amazon recognition to detect what is on the image, or maybe we should use some kind of HTML tag to just get the description, and this will be enough. So currently it will just take the text and it will read the text. We are thinking about possibility of integrating the outcome with third-party MP3 files. So for example, if you have got a link to some kind of audio file, let's put it there and let's join them together. So currently, no, it's not working like this, but we're trying to listen what users need, what they want to get, and so on. So whenever, like Robin said before, 90% of the roadmap is based on the feedback from customers. So whenever we have got a comment on AWS Labs, so where we store the main repository, or when we get some kind of feedback on WordPress plugin page, we get those feedbacks, and based on this, we make modification of the plugin. So definitely, if this you think is one of the things which is quite useful and it should be there, I'm definitely glad to add this to our roadmap, put +1, and hear if other people also are expecting to this functionality. Cool.
Part of the shift too, I think, and to get back to JD's question earlier, I think today we're thinking very much, here's the text in the visual format, how do we convert it to speech? But I think over time, as people get more accustomed to getting that content in speech first, or to consuming that content as a speech output because that's what they prefer, I think we're going to see shifts in terms of people producing that content for speech, or being more flexible about the way that they construct their content, knowing that it's going to be available in both modalities. So no longer this take it in one modality and convert it, but rather make it available across those different channels. So I think we're going to see a shift in the way people produce their content as we learn how to make those kinds of adjustments to account for links or images and so on, which today are sort of those hurdles. Okay. Well, thank you all very much for joining today.